We keep seeing these, machine to machine. If you actually look at the adoption of sensor networks, it's a huge hockey stick right now. Every time the carriers announce their new, subscriber rates, you have to kind of look at how much of that are sensor networks. And there's a big gaping hole, anywhere from 20 to 30% of it, that could much more effectively be augmented with crowdsourcing. And I'll get into a real life example with that. Then another thing that we're starting to see now is, what do you do when the answer from the crowd is no longer text and really is no longer audio, but is purely video? One of my clients, a large Fortune 50 company, put out a request to ask, how can we engage or spend more of our philanthropy dollars more wisely in a couple of different specific areas. And they asked people to film a 1-minute video. And they got back 500,000 videos. How are they ever going to process all of that video that has no closed captioning and no ability to gain the context behind any of that, and having one person sit there or a crowd sit there and analyze every bit of it? So I'm going to show you some techniques that are coming out that are going to allow these types of video answers to come back and be processed from the crowd a little bit better. And then another thing I see with blind spots with corporations today is what they're doing after the crowd has answered and you've got your project implemented. All that information that they provided in that project, I keep seeing it thrown out the back door on a daily basis. And not creating really data depots and kind of predicting information markets. And so I'll cover that a little bit. So the enabler behind this first part is really mobility, or mobile saturation, which we all know. I could give several examples of this next one. I have a specific client that's down in Atlanta. They happen to make a fizzy water, and they actually found out that they were faced with a problem with it out of stock on the shelves. And they had stock in the back room, but they didn't have stock on the shelves. They actually have a different agreement with a lot of their vendors. I think Walmart's a little bit different for this one. But they actually go in and service the shelves themselves. And they can put technology on the shelves. They pull it out of the back room. They have their own planograms. But they actually figured out they were losing billions of dollars a year worldwide by just not having the stock on the shelf. I went into one, I think it was a Dollar General at the time, and we found that there was an empty shelf sitting there for one of their major brands. It had been sitting empty for 2 days because the agreement with them, with that particular store, was that they actually replenished the shelf and not Coca-Cola. So we actually came in and Coke said, the CEO said, I need you to solve this out of stock problem for me. So what we looked at first were all the, the low-hanging fruit of sensor networks. And we said, okay, we'll start looking at all the sensor technologies that are out there. We created a prototype that uses some optical and infrared. It sits on the back side of the shelf and does a lot of great stuff. But when you start looking at how many places within a store they're at, we had one for the pallet, for the shelf, for the end cap, for the cooler. When you look at how many stores they're in, gas stations worldwide, that just doesn't become reasonable, and very, very quickly so. Now there are some instances in large facilities where they do want to see kind of the sales trend from people buying something off of this end cap compared to this shelf to that cooler, and you can get that with sensors, and it's fine that you get a byproduct of out-of-stock sensing. However, a huge swath of their group are smaller stores where it's kind of in one place, and we simply said, after going through a ton of work with them, why don't you guys just start looking at the ability to put a 2D barcode sitting there with your product on the shelf and let your consumers that are walking up and getting disappointed that you don't have product there, and use that opportunity right then to give them something to then scan it and report, hey, you're out of stock of this product. We'll take the GPS with it, we'll tag it, send it back to your supply chain, you'll be aware of it, they get points, we'll actually check it out to make sure that you get a couple of different hits, we map it against your database, and then we notify your supply chain. So you'll see that we actually did a short, easy, one-handed, but rich application, and we did a prototype. I'm actually going to talk to Envy later and see if they want to be the company that actually pushes this forward for us. That was a great talk you had earlier. Provide some incentives, and then give back out, give the feedback back to the consumer. Whenever we kind of injected this into the supply chain, they said, you know, this is fantastic. We love the idea that we can take a customer who's disappointed anywhere in the world, they identify the out-of-stock issue, they become the sensor for us, it alerts our supply chain. And then we waited 2 months of going through massive work to ask one question. Can you guys actually react if you're out of stock somewhere? No, they couldn't. So whenever, you know, anybody that wants to go to any client and talk about their machine-to-machine networks or their sensor networks, the first question you want to ask is, if you do get an alert from a sensor, can you actually do anything about it? If the crowd answers, can you do anything about it? And that'll kind of give you a timeline of how soon you're going to be able to implement that project. Right? And this is a very low-hanging fruit thing. We see power companies wanting to crowdsource outages of street lamps. Dumpster companies want to be able to put 2D barcodes on their dumpsters and let the crowd say when they're full, as opposed to constantly hitting them all the time. You know, it's the critical areas we have found they want to put sensors there, and that's great. But there are some non-critical places where they can really make a big impact, not only to their revenue, but their customer service and relations. The other part that we've been seeing is, you guys have probably seen this on Facebook and other places, where they're starting to do like digisocial, where it pops up the photo, you record your audio over it, and we've started to see a lot of the carriers and other companies like Nuance have APIs to do speech to text, to take all that social data and begin to process it into, along with metadata, into the back end for big data analysis. So it's kind of beyond the answer, but you get your answer into a searchable database, you run some algorithms across it, and you get your information. A lot of you guys have great platforms that can help with that. What we're seeing a lack of is the ability to respond in scale and at speed to 1,500,000 video responses around a single project. And being able to take not just the answer may be an object in that video. It may not even be spoken. They may have music playing behind it, you know, which affects your speech to audio, so you can't just do that. You've also got to take into account all the context. So we're starting to see different solutions come out there that my clients are using to ask for this feedback back, but now they're realizing, oh God, we've got to go through all this video. So there's a company out, I think they launched this past year, Streaming. They made a deal with Amazon. I know the carriers are going to start releasing some what we call visual APIs. They've already released like our Watson platform, which is our audio API. You'll start to see some visual APIs come out. But basically what it is whenever you've got 500,000 or maybe petabytes of data coming in video format, you've got to be able to get to the answer that you were trying to get to, but you also need to be able to parse all that video to store into your data depot for back-end data analytics. And so with that said, when the crowd responds with video, these types of systems don't necessarily have to sit in the customer's environment. They can sit in the cloud. The data doesn't actually have to even sit in the cloud. It can actually just pass through these systems because they do the analysis in real time. They actually do a few things. They'll do facial recognition. If you have an API into Facebook, they'll pull out social photos. They'll pull out video, or what I think it was called from labs. I talked to some of the scientists the other day. They just called it unique publishing ranking. Has this video been used anywhere else? So some of these platforms have publishing rankings so that you'll know, has this video been used already up on YouTube? Did they steal it from somewhere else? Was this in a television commercial? It'll do background checks to look at the audio to see, is that music that if we play this on our commercial, are we going to have to license that? It'll check to see if there's a celebrity face in there. Do we need to contact that celebrity? So it takes into account all that context and then allows you to search it through a heuristics engine that you can create yourself, whether it be object-oriented or specific to text. But our point here is most people look at this and they look for the answer that's right in front of them, the one that they're trying to get to, and they forget that even though the context of the fact that this guy might be wearing a brown jacket may not matter to your answer, but when you start getting beyond this, we find people start throwing their data out with, like a baby with the bathwater. What we're looking for here is keeping the data after the project's over. I've seen literally people with a stroke of a pen delete petabytes of data. and they don't realize that was a bunch of responses coming back from their customers that were being loyal to them in a crowdsourcing way and giving to them lots of great feedback and trending data, and they just didn't see anything beyond the project. So now what our clients are talking about are creating these data depots where every single crowdsourcing project, or whether it be public or private, is actually put into a data depot. It's kept there beyond that, and they allow that to be exposed within their partner ecosystem. And what's interesting, when they start allowing it to be part of their partner ecosystem, they start getting context and analysis. When do our customers in these crowdsourcing engagements like to respond to environmental issues? When do they like to respond to retail, out of stock issues, or whatever that question may be? You begin to get trends about what basically time of day affects your customers and when to ask them certain questions in their crowd. That matters. It also matters what themes they come back with. If you ask somebody about ways that we should do commercials better, and they keep bringing up lacrosse, in a specific area, marketing needs to know that, even though your actual original point was, hey, film a My Coke moment with Coke involved, and we'll kind of do a collage in a video, and we'll do kind of crowdsource marketing. That was one of their original questions, and I watched them delete massive petabytes of data that they could have kept to go back and say, hey, over time we've noticed that we've got a change from people responding using the color blue in their responses to now it's become an orange color in their responses. It has nothing to do with the question. It has to do with the presence or the trending of your particular crowd, the demographic that likes your brand. Oh, one other thing I forgot to mention back there on the video, it also will do logo recognition. If there are other logos in those videos and you want to use it in a commercial, you better know that that logo's in there. So just FYI. The other part is device specific. So it's was this on an iPad? Was this on a Surface? Was this on using a Linux platform, an Apple platform? When my demographic responds, do the Apple users tend to respond during the day when they're at morning when they're at Starbucks? And it becomes very very valuable in the end, because now you start saying, what's the value of me being a partner to Walmart? Or what's the value of me being a partner to Coca-Cola as my company? You start to get into information markets. And that is the backside value of crowdsourcing. Taking all that data that comes from the crowd and allowing it to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then intermingling it with other data, and then running heuristic algorithms across it to find trends, to find the question that you should ask and the question that you should not ask. We always find sentiment recognition, because, oh, by the way, these things have sentiment recognition on them. We get bad sentiment ratings when we talk about this particular color, or this particular cause, or this particular health aspect. So what not to ask is a lot of times something as important as what to ask. And you can find that to front end a crowdsourcing project as opposed to only finding the data on the back end. So again, these are the three big blind spots, if you will, that I'm finding with executives today. One is looking at machine-to-machine networks without realizing that the crowd can augment a major piece of that. They will literally not do a project because machine-to-machine sensor networks can't do the whole thing. They don't even think about leveraging the crowd that way. The other part is when the crowd starts answering a video, and this will come in the next year or two. We're already starting to see it a little bit of it. We'll see all the traffic on the backbone, what happens overseas. And the current generation, they don't like to talk to people on the phone. The next generation, they just want to make a one-way video and get a response on a video. It's amazing with when Apple comes out with their new watch or whatever it ends up being, making a video call will be as easy as making a tweet or a text or anything else. So when communication becomes as easy as that with video, the crowd's going to answer with video. And if you can't process all that information in scale, you need to start thinking about it now, because it's going to happen before we realize it. And if you make a lot of capital investments and not realizing that the answer is going to change in its format, then you're going to have a big problem with depreciation of your assets. Not to get all financial on everybody. And the last part is, big data, it can become part of your crowd. You want to ask the question not only to your crowd, but you can ask the question of your big data as well, and help you format how you engage that crowd. How does my crowd like to be engaged? What time of the day do they like to be on Twitter? What time of the day do they like me to engage them on Facebook? What colors should I use? What sports should I use during different parts of the year? All these things matter, and if you keep throwing out the baby with the bathwater, you're going to lose a great, huge asset as clients start creating partner ecosystems around information markets. So those are the three big blind spots that I'm seeing. If you guys think that I'm insane, come follow me around day to day, and I'll introduce you to these folks. But with you guys in the room, it's like I cannot believe they're throwing out all this data. But to them, it's just right over their head. But it's great because it means that we can, all of us can go kind of show them the ropes and bring that value and be part of the life cycle and life cycle management of them getting greater and greater value in their brand engagement with their crowd. And I will tell you one other thing, and Ron may agree or disagree with this. When you guys go out and begin engaging with large clients, I'm starting to find that the chief marketing organization is highly surpassing the chief information officer when it comes to technology spend. And typically the crowdsourcing stuff affects revenue, and CIOs want to affect cost. So when you start targeting your meetings, you may want to crawl up the CMO organization, unless you can get a hold of somebody that's kind of forward-thinking like Rom or somebody else, in a large corporation. But the CMO, like at Coke, his budget is $6 billion for marketing, and the IT budget's like $450 million, something like that. It's the CMO is going to outspend the CIO easily, and we're starting to see that more and more and more. So just as technology becomes more marketing focused, you may want to push your resources that way. Just FYI.